So over the weekend, we had a little Danny on Danny crime as Danny Garcia returned to the Barclays Center to knock out Daniel Gonzalez in 4 rounds. In what was kind of pitched as a quasi-retirement bout, but I made the joke to Samantha, my wife, the night of the fight, we're doing a corn maze with the family and everything. And so I'm having to check the fight once I get home and not while it's happening. And I tell Samantha, I go, I think Danny knocks him out in 4 rounds and then decides he doesn't want to retire after all, after he knocks this guy out in 4 rounds. And that's essentially what happened. But it was a nice knockout. It was a vintage classic Danny Garcia left hook counter shot knockout. That was the bread and butter that made him the 140-pound champion 10 years ago. Well, over 10 years ago now. I'm gonna let you cook, man. I got a few takes on Danny, but what'd you think of the fight? What's your first impressions of all this?
I mean, the first takeaway was the tremendous send-off that Brooklyn gave him. Philly pulled up, the celebrities in the building, the boxing people that, he came up with and were covering him throughout the sport, Ak and Barack, and we saw Meek Mill there, who he gives a lot of credit to for being a good longtime friend of his. I mean, the
Stephen
boxing,
Fulton
Danny
carrying his
Jacobs.
belts out.
Exactly. The boxing community on the East Coast really did pull up for him. And I like seeing that. I like that he got the Barclay for the event, that he did it independent. I wasn't expecting anything different from the fight. However, to get a knockout with your signature punch early in the fight is picturesque. Like, I have often told fighters in moments like this, famously, I told Juan Manuel Marquez when he knocked out Pacquiao and Pacquiao 4, crowd surf to Mexico and never come back. With these picture perfect endings of careers, they're just so hard to come by that I hope Danny will reflect again on this really being his final moment. And not because he can't fight, he couldn't fight again. I think he probably could. I don't know that the big paper's out there for him. I think his mind is other places, like he has real estate, and he really does seem like a guy who has other things in his life. He's talked about mental health. He's at home in his environment. And what a great send off, man. I hope that this actually is that.
Well, to bring balance to it, like we always do here on this program, it's cool that Stephen Fulton carried his belts out there. It's cool that there was some notable people ringside. They did draw a couple thousand people there, and that's without a network. That's without any kind of machine promoting you. But the downside is guys like Rick Glazer and other people on Twitter saying he lost $400,000 of his own money to get a knockout against an overmatched opponent. I don't know if that's true or not or nothing, but I do want to point out that there is that offsetting voice to what you said, that maybe and there's people tying it in that this is further proof why Zuffa and TKO and Turkey need to take everything over because look, these guys can't produce anything on their own or whatever. But I'm like you, I give props to trying to do it, get it from the muscle, going independent, doing it your own way. Go ahead, Raheem.
Yeah, I mean, did he lose it or did he spend it? Was it the voyage into him as a promoter, his signature fight, his go away fight? He got a fantastic venue. People pulled up. It was a picturesque knockout. It's highlight reel. It's his last show. He made millions and millions of dollars. Does he not have 400K to spend? And he's invested himself well. I mean, he could have done that, or he could have taken a bunch of freaks to, an island and had a yacht party for 300K or something. There's a lot of different ways you can send off in your career. I mean, this is a classy way to do it. And maybe DSG becomes a promotion company, and this is the launch of that. And you do have to spend money before you make any money. I mean, the very same people that they're claiming should take over the sport have spent untold millions,
Lost mad
and
money.
they still aren't turning a profit. So is that criticism going to be lauded at them? I don't think so. I have no problem with Danny Jacobs investing that in his brand and his final fight, which I do again hope that it is, and it felt good. So there's a lot of different ways to burn through that kind of cash if you want to make a spectacle of yourself. I would say that for a fighter, this is the best way to do it.
Would you though do the 300K and the freaks on the yacht party, Raheem? Is that what Raheem is doing as a send off?
I'm so cheap, Sean. I wouldn't even spend $300 at a strip club. Like, I've been to Floyd Mayweather strip club as a guest of somebody else who was taking people there. And even then, with free money, like if Floyd, like I was there with somebody who was so fucking big that they were giving free money. And even then, I was really conflicted in my character. I'm like, one for you, two for me. One for you, two for me.
I'm just laughing because of the comments you've told me at the food courts after weigh-ins and stuff.
I don't even know, man. My quotes come back to
Okay, this
haunt
is
me.
a
I don't know what I
Raheem
said.
quote, audience. So don't get mad at me. This is a Raheem
Oh
quote.
no.
He's like, how much are they selling that for? He's like, nah, no black man is buying a McDonald's burger at that price.
Oh, it was Fat Burger. It
Yeah,
was
fat
Fat
burger. Yeah,
Burger.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I have still never had a Fat Burger on the strip because it is absolute criminal what they are selling those Fat Burgers for. Outrageous. Yeah, yeah, and I think Flo was involved in that too. I should have kept one for you, three for me, so I can afford a Fat Burger at his fucking strip price.
Anyway, the
Anyway,
any,
we've gotten off
well,
topic.
that was no, but that was a beautiful pull counter by Raheem. I said, well, Raheem, there's this offsetting. I throw that punch at you, and you, Terrence Crawford, Floyd Mayweather pull countered over the top. Beautifully done. Um, but back to Danny's show. It's I wasn't surprised he might want to still keep fighting because when you get a knockout like that, it's fun. By the way, that not always in a primordial sense. You get joy off the bloodlust, but being able to deliver and feel that go down to your fists and everything and get a knockout like that is an experience. It's a good feeling and it's intoxicating feeling. And it's like, hey, I remember what this feels. I love this feeling. That's what I suffered in the gym for all those years is to feel this in front of a crowd. But if you fight guys in their prime that still got a pulse and everything, it's not going to be fun. It's going to go back to not being fun again. So you got to keep that perspective if you're Danny Garcia. Um, what now I want to kind of talk about his career in total. And is he a Hall of Fame guy? Is he not a Hall of Fame guy? I believe he really, really fits the bill of the Hall of the Very Good. But the problem is, a lot of guys that would fit that bill in boxing are increasingly getting elected to the Hall of Fame because the Hall of Fame process ensures that three people get in every year. And baseball Hall of Fame doesn't work like that, for example. There are years nobody gets in. They're like, oh, this is the ballot. Nope, nobody makes the cut. In the NFL, you know, you remember Torrey Big Game Holt from The Greatest Show on Turf, the Rams, Torrey Holt. Dude won a Super Bowl as a rookie. His first 7 years in the NFL, he amassed more yards than any other wide receiver in the history of football. Jerry Rice, Randy Moss, you name them. Torrey Holt was that guy. He's been waiting almost a decade to get in the Hall of Fame, Raheem, because the NFL standards, there's a lot of Ricky Waters on those Niner team. Won a Super Bowl, one of the only running backs with over 10,000 yards, still holds records for playoff touchdowns for a running back. He's not in. He's still waiting. But in boxing, a lot of the guys from the Hall of Very Good are increasingly getting in every year. So it is a discussion to be had about Danny. I think you could compare his resume to Ricky Hatton, who's a Hall of Famer. They're not that dissimilar. They were both unified, the man at 140 pounds, and then they both won a belt at 147. And Ricky's in the Hall of Fame, but Ricky beat a legend in Costa Zoo. So I think, that's a little different. And Ricky fought at the highest stakes possible against Mayweather and Pacquiao. Danny never was quite on that stage. He was on some big stages against Keith Thurman on CBS and everything, but it looks like you got something, Raheem.
I'm glad you brought up Ricky Hatton before I jumped in because I was chomping at the bit. I don't want to be contradictory to our conversation about the Boxing Hall of Fame on whole. And this is a great example of what I mean by I don't know what the criteria is, but when you
Mm-hmm.
compare Danny Garcia with Ricky Hatton, while the resume may look somewhat similar,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yes, Ricky stepped up to Pacquiao, Mayweather, but he got beat. I mean, beat, got knocked
Especially by
out
Pacquiao.
crazy.
Yeah,
One of the
yeah.
best highlights. You know what I mean? But
Mayweather, he gave a fun 10-round fight to. Give him credit for
the
that.
difference being that Ricky at the moment was carrying a nation on his back. There's a certain level of fame that Ricky has that Danny Garcia hasn't acquired. There is a certain era of British boxing that Ricky represents in his foray into American television and fighting the big American fighters, even if you count Pacquiao. I know he's not American, but obviously an American superstar at the time. That was part of Ricky Hatton's story. And so that is part of his fame. That is part of his resume for the Hall of Fame. And then post fight, he's the kind of guy that everybody wanted to be around. And then he's got this movie and he's, all this stuff about his personal life and then what he meant to other fighters also after his career. All of that, I think, goes into the pot when people decide whether or not to check that box next to your name. Danny Garcia fought in a very entertaining era. He fought in the highlight of the PBC era. He fought the people that were available to him to fight that they were willing to match him with. And I would say he's a fighter of the year fighter. If it's up to me, right? Like 2023 or sorry, 2013,
2013.
he's a fighter of the year. Like he had a run even, maybe 3 year real good run. And he's a fighter to be remembered. He should be in the Philadelphia, certain the kind of this guy will never have to buy himself a drink ever in Philly or Brooklyn. The guy will be on the tip of tongue of trainers who bring young kids in and Puerto Ricans and all kind of Latin fighters because he represents that. All of these things will have his name etched in history. I'm not trying to write his name out of history, but when it comes to the Hall of Fame mark, I would say that he had a run and he had a real intense year, and that he is a real famous and honorable mention out of Philly. But for me, he doesn't rise to that level yet. And I say yet because just like I mentioned with Ricky and just like we talk about with other fighters, sometimes it's post career that gets put into the mix. I don't know what Danny's going to do.
Right.
I like Danny as a person. I think he's grown as a man. I think he's pursued his career not just respectably but honorably. I like his career. I like his send off for himself. I don't know what is next, and what is next could be enough to get him in. But right now, if it's just on merit and where I might put the levels, Danny Garcia is not making the cut. But I'll tell you something, if you're on the East Coast, if you're in Brooklyn, if you're in Philly, if you're a Latin fighter of any nationality, Danny Garcia is a name you want to hear ring out when you're in the gym because he's somebody that should inspire young fighters and should be etched in the Philly Hall of Fame, if not the National or Global Hall of Fame.
I know the audience, one retort they'll have to you mentioning his exciting era, the PBC high mark era. A lot of fans are categorizing that era now as the era that ducked Terrence Crawford. That those guys were playing in the kiddie pool, having good fights and whatnot, but ultimately were ducking the best fighter in the division. There's more nuance to that, but I do want to represent what I know is out there from what I know what the audience is responding to. Yeah.
And I did give the caveat that we're available for him to fight. Danny Garcia wasn't the kind of star that's going to buck Al Heyman, go rogue, so he can grab a Terrence Crawford fight. Because maybe Terrence Crawford is a greater challenge than anybody Danny faced, but at the same time, don't forget Terrence Crawford wasn't a money fight either. Nobody is breaking their contract or pissing off Al Heyman to go match up with Terrence
One guy
Crawford.
did.
When Danny
Okay.
could have made like what in 2013, in 2014 or 2016? Absolutely not.
One guy did do that, Sean Porter. And sometimes out of bias, because I love Sean and I know you love Sean too. One thing, because Sean's like Danny, he's a Hall of very good guy. But I do think one thing in Sean's favor is he did what you said no one else would do in that stable. He at what time though? Right at the end.
When? Yeah.
Right. In 2021 as a farewell fight when it was his
Exactly.
biggest money fight because he already fought all the PBC guys, right? So yeah, okay. Context matters, doesn't it? But for Danny, I agree with you. The 2012-2013 run was special when he knocked out Amir Khan. I'll never forget watching that fight with my friends here at this house, and Khan is lighting Danny up, and Angel Garcia made that fight hot on Fight Week, and here's Danny looking out of his element on HBO. You could tell I love Lampley, but you could tell Lampley doesn't like him. Lampley doesn't like the father. Lampley wants the HBO guy to kick this guy's ass and send him back to Al Heyman and all, and then eventually, that all broke apart. PBC became, left HBO. They weren't even PBC yet. Anyway, and I remember Khan had the fastest hands in the game at that point, and a lot of people thought Khan was still the best fighter in that division, and that he got jobbed a little bit against Lamont Peterson. This is the Freddie Roach Amir Khan, and Khan is lighting Danny up, and I'm going, Khan is begging for a receipt. And I swear the round before I was like, Danny's might knock him out. And that's while Danny's getting dominated and overwhelmed by the speed of Khan. But Khan, one of his problems was he wanted to stay there for 5, 6, 7, and 8. And he had the speed to go 1, 2, 3, even 4, and reset. 1, 2, 3, 4, reset. 1, 2, reset. But he was fighting with Angel got under his skin so much. And Khan, there's always a flaw for Khan. That 8-punch combo, and I'm like, all Danny needs to do is punch with him once and time him up. Boom, he did. Landed a left hook that shook up the boxing world, knocked Amir Khan out, and then he winds up fighting Lucas Matisse on the Mayweather-Canelo undercard. Everybody was picking Matisse, not I. I actually picked Danny to win that fight, but everybody was picking Matisse. You covered that fight, and he kind of, for the boxing purists that night, stole the show. Because Mayweather had a brilliant performance against Canelo, but it was ultimately a little bit of an anticlimactic fight in itself. And so Danny on the undercard in the co-main kind of like he gave the purists what they really wanted that night. Again, Mayweather was brilliant in the main event, but Danny kind of not stole the show, but had the best fight of the night with Matisse. They were the fight of the night, and Danny won. But then at that moment, he was no longer the underdog. He became the A side. He became the guy. And so they bring him to Puerto Rico. Mauricio Herrera's. Yeah, go ahead.
Before you get to Puerto Rico, you're gonna get the well's gonna get too deep for me to get a bucket of water out of this thing.
Go ahead.
The story of that Amir Khan fight, where you're 100% right, Amir was the favorite. Amir was hot. Amir believed all the things about Amir that Amir should have been believing because he was chasing Mayweather and Pacquiao himself. Thought he got jobbed and needed to show that he was the guy and that he did get jobbed and that he was going to beat this Danny Garcia who wasn't at his level. And the reason that Amir lost that fight, credit to Danny's boxing skills, but he lost that fight at the press conference. He lost that fight in the buildup. He lost that fight when the Garcias got in his head and started insulting him in a fashion that I cannot condone. If you had talked to me at this time on this show, if we had it, I'd been talking about him like I talked about Teofimo Lopez and his outrageous comments and behaviors a few months back. This is also part of the Danny Garcia story. It was a very tasteless, classless, racist, ridiculous moment where they got out way over their skis with their verbose type of insults and just unwarranted attacks on a man's religion and who he is. Now, I'm not saying that that is unheard of in boxing. I obviously know better. However, a kid who I actually believe has more class than that, a person who has to be responsible for their own actions no matter what has been done or said in the past, is just because it's a pattern of some fighters doesn't make it okay. I thought I was hugely, hugely insulted by that exchange from the Garcia side. And at the same time, just like you called Matisse, I called Danny because I was like, Amir is too fucking pissed off. Amir is going to go in there and try to kill this guy, and that never has been Amir's game plan. And he's gonna get and like he did so in a way. If it was gamesmanship, if it was like this is how we're gonna get this guy out of his element and make him vulnerable, then sure, it worked like a charm. However, I don't think that is what it was.
I think
it was 100% sincere. I think they were being who they are. I thought it was disgusting. But with that said, I think Danny matured faster than his father. I think after that, and I only am speculating based on the man he's become, I think he was a little embarrassed by that and got a bit more class after that, seeing what that really looks like. And so, just like the Teofimo Lopez family and the Danny Garcia family, sometimes you gotta get classier than your old man. You gotta kind of show him where the boundaries are if it's going to affect your brand and your career and who you are as a man. sometimes you got to be the be the parent to your parents. If you live long enough, we all kind of meet that moment. And so I'm willing at this point to forgive Garcia for that behavior because I haven't seen it demonstrated like that. Now, it took him a little while to work his way out of it, but I do believe that that was a kind of a turning point moment for him afterwards. Hey, you know what? I can win this on skill. I can be a better guy than that. Yes, it worked against Khan, but that's not the guy who I want to be. And so moving forward, I think I can now say because I talked real, I was harsh on him at the time. I can say that I give this man grace because of the man he's become. But that's why Amir Khan lost that fight. If they hadn't done that and Amir had fought his own fight, I think I still would have had Amir Khan beating Danny Garcia.
Khan, though, even without Angel winding him up, always had that habit of staying there too long with his combinations. Just to be fair to the
I mean,
matchup
but
and
he
stuff.
went into the buzzsaw.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
he
he
didn't
sure
just stay
did.
there. He was like on attack. Now you
He
can
was.
catch Khan. We now know you can catch Khan. You catch him, but he would have been too quick. I think he would have outsmarted Danny Garcia and fought his own fight. If not, stopped him. Definitely outpointed him.
And I always liked Angel Garcia. Like he said things. He's one of these people for me that if he said it, it comes out really gross. But Angel says it. I don't know. Not that I excuse those moments where he said what he said about Terrence, and he said, and the famous quote that he said to Khan before the fight, the racist quote was, "I never met a Pakistani that could fight." Right, and obviously that's something nobody, no, none of us should talk like that about other groups of people. But overall, I just always liked Angel Garcia. He always struck me as a guy, first of all, that really does love his son. Not isn't just trying to mooch off his son, live vicariously through his son. I don't know. I'll just say that I won't go into a long tirade defending anything about Angel. They did put a muzzle on him in the second half of Danny's career. They stopped letting him speak. It was really
As
once
they
he
should.
supported. Yeah, but it was really once he supported Trump. It's like that's what did it. It wasn't all the other stuff. Just let the man have his First Amendment. He keeps it real and says what he thinks
Sean,
for
I
better
don't
or
think it was
worse.
his. I don't think it was his politics. I think it was his character, and really, nobody wants to be associated with that kind of jargon. It doesn't really. It just doesn't have a place in boxing. Again, I recognize that other people have done it. There are more egregious quotes that you can pull out if you're more offended by something else. But it's just like I can't. And I hope it was Danny who. And again, I am completely speculating. Who might have went around his father to network of executives or to PR people and just been like, I can't really tell my dad to shut up, but I like that calm down because that's not who I want to be.
Right.
Again, maybe that never happened, but I kind of hope it did. And the way he stopped Danny, I mean, behaving that way and just kind of like, kind of with an eye roll, oh, that's just Pops being Pops. And then he didn't really protest when his dad started to get shut down. Like this Trump shit, I don't think it's about who he's voting for, but I think it is indicative of a very poor sportsmanship and some racial undertones that just don't have any place in anything, much less when you're, fighting people from all over the world who deserve respect.
Again, not defending it, but I grew up around people when I was in New York that were like Angel Garcia of all different groups. They're East Coast equal opportunists. You know what I mean? And again, it's not excusing it, but they'll say a racial slur about everybody, including their own. But that doesn't excuse it. But there is a culture of that from the era Angel Garcia is from, where that's how they just keep it real about everybody, and he would have just as many racist things to say about Puerto Ricans, I guarantee you, as he does about, and that doesn't excuse it. But anyway, I
Yeah, but
liked
he
Angel
didn't.
Garcia,
But he
but
didn't. And if he
right,
had, that wouldn't be okay either. That is a
right.
lack of maturity. That is a lack of class. That is a lack of knowing where you are. You use your inside voice. I'm not saying be racist at home and be, fake outside. But if you are that, then you have to understand that when you're in the public, when you're representing your son, when you're creating a brand, when you are raising a man in front of the world, then you have to know the difference between public and private. You have to know the difference between appropriate and inappropriate, classless or classy, tasteless or having some kind of character. And if you're going to be on network and you're going to be doing these kind of things, then expect for people to take umbrage at that. And if they have the ability to muzzle you, and then they most likely will. And I bet you even some of the people muzzling him might be as racist as him. They're just smarter than him. I'm not even making that judgment. I'm just saying that that shit has no real place, man. And be like, oh, I'm just keeping it real because I'm an equal opportunity offender. You're not a fucking comedian. You know what I mean? You are a
It
trainer
was
of
funny.
boxing. You know what I mean? Some of it was funny and some of it was like embarrassing. Most of it was embarrassing. And the parts that were funny were just laughing because it's uncomfortable. We all can make those kind of jokes if you know the person you're talking to. But when you're talking in public, it's a different thing, man. This thing, you know what I mean? It's just it's like you're not even the son. You're the father. It's embarrassing. You're embarrassing yourself. And I think he embarrassed Danny for a bit.
A lot of people agree with you. Your sentiment is shared by many. I like people to be who they really are, and for better or worse, and for us to let the chips fall where they may. In that, I liked Angel, but back to Danny. Um, he he was a guy that when faced with he was really a guy that typified a styles make fights, that cliche. Because if you put in the right style against him, he was a wonderful counterpuncher. Had good, very decent hand speed, good punch selection, really good timing, especially with that left hook. But it had to be against a certain mold of fighter. That's why he looked so good against Matisse when everybody thought Matisse would beat him. That kind of style at that weight class didn't really give him fits. Actually, him and Ricky Hatton would have been a really interesting fight because Ricky Hatton is an all-out pressure fighter, and Danny wants that. But then when you made him pick his feet up and take the lead, because he's a counterpuncher through and through, when you force him to pick his feet up and initiate and be first, it was a pretty significant drop off from the guy you'd see against an Adrian Granados, a Lucas Matisse. Put him up against those guys, and you're like, man, he's a really world caliber guy. He's really good. He's underrated. And then right when you think he's underrated, you put him in against a guy like Lamont Peterson or Mauricio Herrera, who makes him pick his feet up and be first, and then, oh, never mind, he ain't all that. So there was always a significant drop off based on the style he was in. And really, to me, after so Mauricio Herrera was supposed to be the moment his homecoming to Puerto Rico, which was funny because he didn't really speak Spanish, but they took him to Puerto Rico, and then everybody thinks Herrera got robbed in Puerto Rico. And from that moment on, he was never really an elite fighter again. He won a vacant WBC belt against Paulie at 147. He beat a faded Brandon Rios, a faded Keith Thurman. A lot of people thought Lamont Peterson should have gotten the nod. That was probably his best win against a prime opponent after the 140. Well, because I think they did fight at 140, but after the glory days of 2012 and 2013.
You
So
know what you're describing, Sean? A fighter who might have needed a new trainer. A fighter who somewhere along the line might have needed a more seasoned, dare I say, more mature guy in his corner. Now, Danny will say, obviously, like every son who has a father in his corner until he gets rid of him, if they ever do, that we started together. I wouldn't be boxing if it wasn't for him. Literally, I physically wouldn't be on this planet if it wasn't for him. We ride together, we fight, we win and lose together. And Danny particularly would say, "I'm not putting this money in some other family's pocket. We're keeping it all in house." That's all fine. But all of that might end up with you having a career that doesn't reach a potential that we'll never know because you don't have a fighter who has a trainer who's able to elevate his fighter's ability or able to teach his fighter new tricks before he gets old. Maybe he would have, maybe he wouldn't have been able to have more success and a Hall of Fame first ballot career if he had had a new trainer. And I can't say that that's true, but I can say that we don't know. And we're certainly describing a career that sounds like he needed somebody else along the way to elevate his game.